Hello and welcome to episode 167 of the Clean Energy Show, a very special international edition. From the White Horse's Cottage in Portmeirion, Wales, I'm Brian Stockton.
In the Clean Energy Show world headquarters at an undisclosed location in North America, I'm James Whittingham, not traveling, not on vacation, not having a good time, but this week the lifecycle cost of Tesla Model 3 nearly matches the cheapest car you can buy in America, the Mirage. It's surprising since the Mirage's full self-driving involves piano wire between the steering wheel and your toes.
Wildfires in Canada have so far burned 10 times more land than usual. This is not including James's backyard fire pit that can be seen from space.
UK comic actor Rowan Atkinson says EVs are no good. On the other hand, his character Mr. Bean is all for electric cars. He just hasn't said anything yet.
Okay, so the guy who drives a McLaren F1 thinks that electric cars aren't clean enough. Okay, got it. So, CharIn, the association behind the CCS charging standard, is angry with Ford for adopting the Tesla charge port instead of CCS. You know what I'm annoyed about? There's 87 different kinds of USB connectors, and a new one comes out every couple of years. I'm drawing the line at USB-C. No more. No more. I draw the line.
And also the show this week, are EVs unprofitable for everyone but Tesla? And will agriculture electrify soon? All that and more in this international edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, so here we are, James. This is weird. I'm on the other side of the world, 7 hours different from you, here in Portmeirion, Wales.
Brian, you're a 10-minute drive from me in our city, and the delay is shorter between halfway around the world. It's crazy.
Yes, the Wi-Fi turns out to be fantastic here where I'm staying in Portmeirion.
I'm not having a lot of confidence in our internet infrastructure where we live. Then you have to go elsewhere to see how the other half live, and apparently they live better than we do.
Yeah, it's strange because I've got fiber optic in my house, and we were one of the first people really to get fiber optic that I remember hearing about. But maybe they went too soon on it, and now their fiber optic is old or something. But anyway, this is great.
So where are you exactly? You're in Wales, but you're in a small town, very small town in Wales, on an inlet.
Yeah, it's called Portmeirion, but I'm going to get to that later. I've got a whole list of
grievances of
travel debacle to get to here. But yeah, I wanted to talk about, we had huge delays getting here, and I talked about a very similar thing when we were traveling from Edmonton at Christmas time on the podcast, and there was a massive blizzard, and we were stuck in Edmonton. We couldn't get out. We ended up having to rent a car and so forth. I don't know. I complained about it a lot on the podcast. We thought that we would really learn from that experience. And so, now we take that into account when we're planning our trips. And we thought, okay, well, we've learned something. We'll maybe do it better next time. But I don't know. It it wasn't any better. So this time it was just Air Canada's computers went down, and they had gone down a few days previous. They went down again. So all kinds of flights were canceled on the day we were trying to get out. And it's always more difficult when you're in a smaller city because we have to connect through somewhere. So to get to London, you've got to fly through Calgary or Toronto. So, anytime there's a connecting flight, it's a bit of a nightmare. So we, spent half a day at the airport. They kept delaying, and then finally canceled the flight. And then we got rebooked the following day. But the rebook went Regina, Toronto, Montreal, and then London, which at least it was the next day, but not ideal. We were going to have to spend several hours in Toronto anyway, so the overall time was about the same, but of course you don't want to take an extra flight if you don't have to. So we decided to just go with it. We didn't bother trying to change it or make it better. One of the things we learned last time, it is great to have a travel agent book your flights, because then if a travel agent books your flights, then it's their responsibility to help you. But I don't know, I've now given up on that idea, because if you get canceled, chances are 10,000 other people got canceled. And so if everyone's trying to rebook, it doesn't really matter if you have a travel agent trying to help you. Everybody's screwed, and you're basically out a couple of days. So I don't know. You just have to plan for at least 2 days of delays now if you're booking a flight. I can't think of any other way around it. I'm retired, so I can kind of do that. But, you know, it did suck to miss. We lost one whole day, and making it to Wales is quite difficult. It's a long journey, a couple of train rides from Wales, and then eventually a taxi. So it sucked to actually lose a day. But, you know, doing it again, we maybe could have planned for, you know, a couple more days of delay or something. But, you know, anyway, the point in terms of our podcast and in terms of, you know, clean energy, and, you know, we talk a lot, obviously, about transportation. It just feels like the whole, you know, air travel system is basically broken, and it really needs a rethink. And maybe once, you know, the fleet of planes is electrified, maybe there's an opportunity there to kind of change things up somehow and do things differently, because we're at a place now where really it's just, you know, as our friend Don said, it's really, it's a low margin business. It's, you know, the lowest price is the only thing that matters. They just cut costs as much as possible. Hopefully they're not cutting costs on safety to keep the planes up in the air, but everything else is just cut to the bone. They just don't have the people, the planes, the infrastructure to deal with any problems if problems arise. So I don't know, maybe, you know, once air travel goes electric, maybe there's a chance to kind of reinvent it and do it differently somehow. I'm not really sure how.
Well, this was a system failure, right? A computer system failure at our largest airline, Air Canada. Yeah. And it made some headlines, but it wasn't a major deal because it only affected part of their travel, but it affected you. Yeah. So it wasn't a complete outage like they've seen in the United States recently.
Yeah, it was a big problem. And then at one point when we were trying to get on the plane from Toronto to Montreal, they had boarded about a quarter of the passengers. And then they had to pull everybody back because the boarding passes were wrong.
Oh, for God's sake.
Like there was, like we had a seat number that didn't exist because they had switched planes kind of at the last minute.
Right.
So there were people trying to get on the plane for a seat number that did not exist. So they had to pull everybody off, put us all back on again. Yeah, it's, you know. So Chantal Kreviazuk was on our plane from Toronto to Montreal, Ooh. Canadian pop star.
I met her once.
Yeah, well, we were in a film festival together, and I was looking at her across the airport thinking, is that her? I wasn't 100% sure it was her. And she was kind of looking back at me, and I'm like, well, maybe she remembers me from the film festival, but
maybe you're
that
hot.
was a long time. But that was a long time ago. So, you know, anyway, if I'd gotten closer to her, I would have said hello and checked and see if that was.
She's probably like,
her.
Is that guy going to kill me? Is he staring at me? Is he
well, that was
crazy
the more
fan?
likely scenario, because it's unlikely she would have remembered me from a film festival screening, you know, a dozen years ago. But
well, I shot an interview with her in the mid-'90s, and she was none too happy.
Oh yeah,
I got creative. Well, she didn't like doing interviews, and I had a staff of volunteers who weren't, you know, geniuses, but they also were better than probably your average TV reporter at doing entertainment, because I trained the little buggers. And I decided to do something creative with a camera and put it way far away, like, you know, 100 feet away, and just zoom right the hell in and just have this crazy look to it because it was an entertainment music show. And yeah, she wasn't happy about that. She wasn't happy about questions about God because she had the word God in the song. And yeah, she was just got very defensive and very ornery. Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe that's why she was staring at me, because she knows that I know you from the podcast. And so she was mad at you.
That's what it's all about.
Probably it.
But by God, she was a talented person back then.
Oh yeah,
I haven't followed her very much since.
Amazing singer-songwriter. Air Canada, they've also got Wi-Fi on their airplanes now, but like most of the time it doesn't work. So like, why bother having it if it doesn't work? Like, I don't need Wi-Fi on a plane, but if you advertise it, of course I'm going to try and hook up to it.
Sure.
But most of the time it doesn't work. So then I wanted to talk about finally getting to London. You know, obviously a long travel. Even if everything goes perfectly, it's a very long trip. But I was kind of worried because we needed to get out to Brentwood, which is quite a long way from Heathrow. So we have to take a couple of trains to get there from the airport. So I was kind of worried that would actually be the worst part of the trip, because we've been traveling like all day long and all night. And then, oh God, we're going to have to take a couple of trains. But it just, compared to the airport, compared to the airplanes, it was like a dream. It was lovely. It's like, oh, anything to get out of the airport. And, you know, having to schlep on a couple of trains was like, it was like paradise. It was heaven. It was so great. They should have
a high-speed rail between the continents. There, I said it. Call it the Concorde.
Yes. Well, here's the high-speed rail that they do have now in London. I wanted to talk about this. And we do talk occasionally about public transport on the show, but probably not enough because like James and I live in a city that really doesn't have public transit. There's a few buses.
It's a car city.
It's a car city, and it's difficult for a small city to really have public transit because it's, there's no economies of scale. So we have a few buses. They don't run very frequently. Half the time they're empty or close to empty. But of course, you get to London and the city's all about public transit. Like there's a zillion train lines, tube lines, all this kind of stuff. You can go all over the UK on trains quite easily and regularly. So far, all the trains I've been on have been running exactly on time. Like they've been leaving to the second in terms of the schedules. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the Elizabeth line, which is the new cross-London rail line that just recently opened. It allows there's an express train from Heathrow to Paddington Station, which is basically right downtown in London. And the express train can take you there in 15 minutes, right to downtown London, which is amazing. It's been under construction. It started in construction in 2009. Obviously building underground and rail in a city like London is huge and expensive and it takes a long time. So they started in 2009. It was supposed to open 4 years ago, but finally just opened this year. The Queen, it's called the Elizabeth line after the Queen, and she was able to do the official opening before her untimely demise at the age of 170 or whatever it was.
Untimely?
Yeah.
I timed it perfectly. Yeah. I won an office pool.
Yeah. So I better watch what I,
Yeah, you can't badmouth the Queen over there. And those days are over until you get back home.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's 10 new stations with this line, and then 31 other stations were upgraded to include it. Some of the platforms are still not long enough. So when you're on the Elizabeth line, it'll sometimes say the next station, only the front cars are going to open the doors. The back cars are not going to open their doors because there's no platform there. So that was a bit weird. I do think they eventually plan to make all the platforms bigger, but
so
these are bigger, longer trains. So do they unload the front
and then unload the back, or not unload the back at all?
They just don't unload the back at all. So if you're going, you have to know if you're going to one of those stations, you got to get on one of the front cars.
I see.
But yeah, the service on the trains was amazing. So we had to then took a train from London to Llandudno Junction in Wales. That was about a 4-hour train ride. Wales is pretty far from London. And that's where I saw all the amazing offshore wind turbines. I sent you a picture of them.
I think I tweeted one of them out for people. If you want to see it, check our Twitter feed.
Yeah, Llandudno Junction. So I looked it up, and yeah, there's tons of offshore wind in Wales, and they're planning to build more of it. It's way far out there, but it is still kind of visible from the beach. I think there's probably some people annoyed that, if you're sitting on the beach in Llandudno Junction, that you can see the wind turbines. It's not all the way across the horizon, but like a quarter of the horizon way off there.
You've got some beautiful weather there, unusually beautiful weather. It's 23 and sunny, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're watching me on video, the weather here has so far been amazing, basically perfect. Sunny and 22 Celsius every day. So the biggest one in Wales, and I believe that's the one that I saw, 576 megawatts of offshore wind. There's 160 turbines. They basically have lots more planned. So there is going to be 50 more turbines. Oh, they're going to do floating wind turbines.
That's right. I saw that in the news. They're going to add some floating, some of the first floating out in that area.
Yeah, in that same area. So they're going to make it even bigger.
It must mean it's deep. It gets deep where they're going to put it. Maybe it's a bit further out or something.
Yeah, that could be. But the goal for Wales is to have 70% of their electricity from the wind turbines by 2030, which is amazing.
Which is coming up fast.
Yeah. No, it's not too far away, but already, tons of offshore wind. It's something that clearly makes sense. They have onshore wind here as well. And then, I want to talk about Portmeirion, which I am right now. If you're looking at me on video, the backdrop here is amazing. James, have you ever seen the TV show The Prisoner starring Patrick McGoohan?
I have. I didn't get into that show. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is a TV show from the 1960s.
Well, I was a baby. What did you expect? Did it play when you were a kid on other channels?
I watched it in the 80s for the first time. Like CBC used to run it at midnights on like Friday nights. And that's the first time I saw it. And then sometime around 2000, I watched the whole series again and was, just amazed by it. It's just a super cool, funky series. The idea of the show is Patrick McGoohan is a spy, and he wakes up one morning in the village, which is Portmeirion, and it's this beautiful, picturesque, amazing place. It's this super lovely, wonderful place with all these friendly people, but he can't leave. Every time he tries to leave, they capture him and bring him back. He's a spy that knows too much, so he's destined to live the rest of his life in the village. But when I saw it in the early 2000s, I decided to Google, like, where did they shoot this? Because the town is just amazing. The village is just this super cool place. And, you know, it turns out that it's Portmeirion. So this is, you know, North Wales. It's a seaside town. And the whole town was basically constructed by one guy. It was originally just a few buildings, an estate. Somebody owned the area and a few buildings. And so I'm staying in one of the original buildings. So this is called the White Horse's Cottage. And it was a fisherman's cottage built in the 1850s.
Really?
Yeah. And it's been beautifully refurbished.
Is it musty?
It is not musty at all. The renovation is amazing. I believe it was renovated in the 60s, and then there must have been another recent renovation because everything is super modern, modern appliances, LED lighting. It's great. Like, it's super comfortable for a building built in the 1850s. Sir Clo Williams Ellis, he bought the original property, and then from like 1925 to 1975, he built the whole village. He was the architect. He designed the entire village. So the idea was, well, what if you could build a village from scratch and design all the buildings yourself? And that's what he did. And it's sort of inspired by like an Italian villa, but it's here in Wales. So it's kind of like an Italian villa, but, you know, kind of not. It's his own kind of spin on it. So it's this kind of like idyllic little, you know, community where this one architect designed all the buildings. And but the White Horse's Cottage, where I am, one of the original buildings, and this is the cottage where Patrick McGoohan stayed when they filmed The Prisoner.
Wow. And you were just born when that show was being...
Yeah, like I was born a couple of years before it came out. But yeah, it's a super cool series if anybody's interested. It's the funky 60s British spy show. It's just a couple of seasons. There's like around 15 episodes,
British.
I think.
Why would there be more than 2 seasons at most? Well, London has seen a heat wave, the longest stretch without rain since last July when record-breaking temperatures scorched the capital. Or is anyone talking about the weather over there?
No, just how nice it's been. And apparently it's been super nice here in Wales for weeks now.
Do they bring you tea at a certain time of day? Is there a certain time of day where everyone's drinking tea? Tea time? Not
exactly, but I'll tell you a story. We were at dinner last night in the hotel. So there's a hotel here, which is featured in the series. They basically filmed The Prisoner everywhere in town. So everywhere is sort of like a tourist spot. But we were having dinner in the restaurant. We'd had reservations, and a guy came up to us, like a fancy restaurant guy, and he said, "This is for the residents of White Horses," and he put a postcard on our table. And it was like, ooh, this is fancy. What is this? And we flipped it over. And there was a handwritten note on the back, and it said, "For the residents of White Horse's Cottage, we've been told that there's going to be a surprise fireworks display tonight for today's bride and groom. They do a lot of weddings here." And so they wanted to let us know that there were going to be fireworks last night at 10:30. And we thought, oh, that's nice. That's super cool. Anyway, the fireworks were basically above our building. Like, they were just right over there behind me, behind that tower there that's behind me. So like, we were basically in bed ready to go to sleep, and suddenly this massive cracking fireworks display. But we got up and had a look and took some pictures. It was super fun. But the guy with the postcard, it was like something out of the TV show. It's great.
Wow. Okay. So you weren't invited to the wedding?
No.
What's happening with your house renovation while you're gone?
Oh, yeah. That was the other complication in our travel. So you remember last year we redid half of our ceiling with spray foam.
Right.
Our house, half of it is vaulted ceiling and half of it has an attic. So last year we did the vaulted half, and that was a big disruption. And this year we're doing the attic half, and we thought we'd be geniuses and plan it for our vacation. So the house is going to be severely disrupted. But they can do it while we're gone, which is great. But we realized, okay, we have to move all the furniture out of the bedrooms.
Oh.
So, we had to do that in advance of leaving. So we had to spend a night in the hotel in our city before the flight.
Wow. And then there was no flight.
Yeah. So,
oh, man.
And then it was canceled. So we had to spend 2 nights in a hotel in our own city before we even left on the trip.
Wow. Boy, that just makes the whole thing that much worse, doesn't it? I mean, come on.
Like by the time we started the trip, it was like we'd been already traveling for 2 days.
And by the way, I am aware, listeners, that there's no way to build a high-speed train across the ocean without great expense and engineering that is yet to be developed.
This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Okay, so we got a story here from an organization called CharIn. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it or not, but this is the association that is in charge of the CCS charging standard. And we talked quite a bit about this last week because there was a big announcement from Ford that they're going to adopt the Tesla charging connector for their North American cars. And I think this is a big deal. It's a good idea because the Tesla charging connector is amazing. It seems like a much better design than the CCS connector. But of course, there's a standards association that's in charge of this, and they want to promote the CCS charging standard. And so, yeah, they're annoyed and they think that this is going to go off the rails because they don't want to have more than one charging standard. And of course, they're correct there too. But if Tesla is already the most ubiquitous charging port in North America, it's an easier switch probably for everybody to go the Tesla way instead of the other way. And of course, they also, in their statement, they talked about, CCS is this global charging standard. But it's important to point out that it's actually slightly different in Europe than North America. I'm not sure why. And then China uses a different standard altogether. So, it's looking like we'll end up, even if it doesn't go the Tesla way in North America, it'll still be 3 different charging standards, one for North America, one for Europe, and one for China.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mess that maybe could have been solved 20 years ago, but nobody got their act together.
It's not too many people are taking their cars on the high-speed rail across the ocean. They're just
that's right.
It's a small problem, and I'm sure if you are that rich to do that, you can buy an adapter or something.
Yeah. How about a tunnel under the ocean? Would that work?
Yeah, it's one hell of a boring tunnel. I don't know. It'd be too dark for too long. It'd have to be a train.
Yeah.
And you'd have to go to sleep at least for, how long would a train take? Why are we talking about this? I don't know, but it is fascinating.
But, I really do want airplane travel to be reinvented somehow. And for the travel within the continent, yeah, we should just be doing more high-speed rail. High-speed rail makes way more sense.
Well, look at California, though. It's going to be a generation between, maybe 2 generations between planning and completion there, and it's really expensive. It's not easy because it has to be nonstop.
Yeah, and we're so far behind here in North America. Like they have so much rail travel here in Europe. Like it just, it's a bit more of a no-brainer. We're kind of starting from scratch almost in North America. But, the entire country of Canada is almost laid out in a straight line. So I've never understood why our rail service isn't better. Most of the country lives within, an hour of the U.S. border, 2 hours of the U.S. border. So you could do one high-speed rail line across the country, like we have our #1 highway, and serve like 90% of the population. So it's possible, but I'm not holding my breath.
All right. I just wanted to mention that Clean Technica has said that they ran the numbers and found that a Tesla Model 3 is cheaper to own, at least it's if you include the resale value, than the cheapest car in the United States, which is the Mitsubishi Mirage, which I haven't even heard of, but it must be one cheap little car.
Oh yeah, it's a tiny, tiny little hatchback,
and it's about 20 grand. That's a fair chunk of money for something that's like that. Now, a lot of it has to do with resale value because obviously the Mirage is not going to sell after 8 years for a lot of money, but the Model 3s, of course, are selling for a lot of money, and a lot of people worry about depreciation of EVs. And that is true for some brands, even the Volkswagen, as some people in the United States are having a hard time with the ID4 resale values. A lot of that has to do with, it's the first year the car came out and there's a lot of problems. Second year, a few more problems, but they're going to get that worked out. And it's going to be a pretty decent car, I think, although it has divided a lot of people. But anyway, you can check that out on Clean Technica. They ran the numbers and, it's pretty close now than you know, because the Model 3 is not a Mirage, right? It's a pretty damn nice car that has everything you can ever want in a car, and then some. So
yeah, like when you buy a new car, I think a lot of people don't realize what you're mostly paying for is the depreciation, because most people who buy a new car, they sell it in 3 years, 5 years, or even longer. So really the cost of the car is whatever the depreciation is between when you buy it and when you sell it. That's the actual cost of the car. And, you know, it's not going to be great for something like a Mitsubishi Mirage.
No, I really lucked out on that with my last Prius that I just sold for literally twice of what it should have sold for because of the way the used market is. And the fact that cab drivers here in the Western Canada are clamoring for these, you know, low-cost, low-maintenance vehicles with low fuel efficiency, you know, use. Anyway, when I just dropped my daughter off at school and came back, I was listening to the radio, and there was a person who studies wildfire air pollution, and they were saying basically none of it's any good for you. No level is good. If you see a haze in the sky, it's not good for you. And they don't understand just how bad it is, but generally speaking, particulate matter is not good for you. So, I mean, the world, regardless if we went 100% electric today, is still going to continue to warm. You know, there's nothing we can do about it. The best case scenario is it levels off by mid-century. And, you know, if the oil companies have their way, that's not going to happen. It's going to be later than that. It'll be the end of the century. Wouldn't it be nice in my old folks' home if, you know, I watched a news report that said that, you know, global temperatures have leveled off, everything's fine. And your grandchildren's grandchildren are going to live in a world that you lived in when you were a kid, and everything's going to be normal, not burning all the time.
Yeah, well, speaking of everything burning all the time, wildfires in Canada have already burned 10 times more land than usual. This story is from Bloomberg. Of course, we've had terrible wildfires here in Canada. The fire season starts much later. It started very early. We had an early start to it. It's very bad. By the way, when the plane landed in Toronto, Toronto was filled with forest fire smoke.
Really?
Which is
from Quebec?
Frightening because it's, I'm not sure from where, but it's, you know, basically tons of different places in the country.
There's 400 fires burning right now. Yeah. And Halifax on the East Coast, which is soggy and wet, is like 200 homes went down outside of Halifax. Quebec's got wildfires. Alberta's got wildfires. And of course, BC has wildfires. All of that is basically abnormal for this time of year. And it's not good because the smoke is, if the smoke is covering half the continent, you know, even if you live in New York City, you're getting it. And a lot of places in the United States are getting our smoke, and it's not healthy.
No, 28,000 Canadians have been evacuated so far. They did have to shut down some of the oil sands oil production in Alberta for a while because that's where a lot of the fires are, but apparently most of it has restarted again, sadly, I guess. But no, this is a crazy, terrible, horrible fire season, maybe similar to what they had in Australia a few years ago. I don't know. Canada's a bigger country, so we've got a bit more space for the smoke to maybe blow around, and but it's not great.
You know, by the way, I'm back in my pool, and yesterday it was 90.25 degrees Fahrenheit, which is basically lobster boiling temperatures, at least when the lobster is me.
James boiling temperatures, yeah.
It was too hot. You know, I'm thinking about these wildfires in the future that more people are going to need air conditioning. And if you don't have it and you're getting a heat pump, well, that's good. Like you never had an air conditioner. You're upgrading to a heat pump. And then now you'll have AC, which is good. Good timing, Brian, because I think the earth is getting, you know, we're going to have more hot summers that we've never had before. And another thing is HEPA filters. Like we're going to have to live indoors now. Like a lot more people are going to be like Phoenix, who live indoors, get into the car, go to an air-conditioned mall, come back home, get into an air-conditioned house. Air conditioners running constantly. You don't live outdoors, which is sad. And, of course, their winters are nice. You can go out there. But, you know, we're going to need filters, air filtration. You know, invest in air filtration, people, because this seems like something our new normal.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed my heat pump will be installed by the time we get back. That's the other thing that's going on right now. But yeah, as we reported last year, the massive heat wave on the west coast of North America, lots of people in Vancouver and Seattle don't have air conditioning because it just hasn't typically been hot enough. So yeah, they're getting it on two fronts there now on the west coast. it's so hot that people are dying from heat stroke, and they're getting lots of forest fire smoke there as well, because lots of forests in that area. So yeah, we're all going to be locked in our homes with the HEPA filters on. Well, it's time for What Do You Think? This is where I ask Brian stuff that I don't know about. So GM's Mary Barra, the CEO, says that no profitable mass market EV under 40,000 US until the end of the decade. Basically, she's saying they're losing money on everything. Everyone is going to lose money except for Tesla. Yeah, and then Ford, I think the Ford CEO said something similar. So what's going on? There was a really interesting interview. Robert Llewellyn from the Fully Charged show did an interview with the Ford guy. Yeah, he kind of admitted how far behind they are, because it's mostly a software problem. Ford seems to have realized that software is the key to this, and that's why they're so far behind, because they typically use multiple suppliers. And when you use multiple suppliers for your software, it's hard to get them to all talk together on the same protocols at the same time and the same IP, basically copyright kind of rules. So, they seem to have figured this out and are trying to work on that. But that's why things like over-the-air software updates have been difficult, and, why Tesla has a big lead in that, because they've been planning for that since the very beginning and kind of doing all the software themselves. So that's the Ford side of it. Yeah, Mary Barra, I mean, she's basically already wrong. There was an update in the U.S. with the IRA and the federal tax credit. So the cheapest Model 3 is now eligible for the full $7,500 tax credit, which is a big deal. So the Tesla Model 3 with the tax credit, maybe depending on what state you're in, is already under 40 grand and it's profitable. So
yeah, that's 38 now, I think. Isn't it like the actual sticker price 38 for some of the Model 3s now?
It could be. And yeah, I'm not sure. You'd have to check that out. And yeah, I'm not sure.
Tesla's been lowering their prices to boost demand, but they've only got a small selection of cars, right? They've got 4 vehicles right now, and 2 of them are very expensive. And I, a lot of people, myself included, are gravitating towards other cars that we like too. But everyone can't have a Tesla.
And I just want to mention, one of my observations about being here in England is that all of the men look like Robert Llewellyn. He's the template.
Maybe there's multiple versions. Maybe he cloned himself. Maybe there's only ever been one Englishman.
Well, there's somebody that wrote a book about Portmeirion, and his name is Robin Llewellyn, and I'm wondering if it's his brother, but I'll have to look into that.
Maybe he's in the hotel somewhere with an EV plugged in. Yeah. I don't know what to make of that, because if that's true, then these companies aren't going to want to sell any EVs. They're not saying they don't want to sell them, but of course it seems like they don't want to sell them, because the demand is far outstripping supply for everybody. Hyundai, Kia, Volkswagen, everybody. It's crazy.
But Ford really seems to want to sell them. They seem to really be working on this. They seem to be admitting that they're behind. Herbert Diess from Volkswagen was kind of saying similar things. He got ousted. I don't know if the Ford guy, Jim Farley, is going to get ousted, but he seems to know what the problem is. But they're number 2 behind Tesla in North America in terms of vehicles sold, so they seem to actually want to do it.
And they're making compelling vehicles, but they're expensive, and they need to get that price down fast. It's not just the batteries, although that's a large part of it. So what do you think about this Rowan Atkinson saying, keep your old petrol car because it may be better than buying an EV? And of course, everyone on the internet who knows anything pointed out that is factually incorrect, that there's been study after study after study. He points out, he's very precise in his cherry picking of all the anti-EV tropes. There was one outlier conservative study that he decided to quote, and that is, there's always going to be outlier studies, but it doesn't mean they're the right one if 99% of these studies say something else.
Yeah, I think the idea is, if you're a person who almost never drives, just buy some old car and then almost never drive it, and then you're probably slightly cleaner than getting a new EV. We probably shouldn't even be talking about this, because this has gotten so much publicity and so much press, everybody's talking about it. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not going to get the other side of it and are probably going to believe what was in the article.
That's right. That's how it works.
But I'm mostly annoyed at The Guardian, even though it's an opinion piece. The Guardian should have done basic fact checking on the article. Like they should be embarrassed that they allowed that to be published. It's basically full of errors that anybody could check very easily.
So a director of Neon Research on Twitter says he's complaining about current batteries and implying we have to wait for better ones. That's not true. The current ones will already last the lifetime of the car. And even my stupid Nissan Leaf with the worst battery in the world is still up and running and will continue to be for some time, I hope. And the batteries, every other battery and battery cooling system, management system is better than that. So yeah, we anticipate, well, some cars go 1 million miles, and then have to change the battery at that point, or 1 million kilometers. It's a long way that these batteries can last. So the current ones already last lifetime of the car, and he fantasizes about hydrogen and e-fuels that are the future. That, of course, is not true for personal transportation in any way, shape, or form. He might use an e-fuel for his supercar. That might be, you want to keep your combustion supercar, you use an e-fuel for it.
It's unfortunate, and if I see him here in England, I will slap him.
Please do. This has been another edition of What Do You Think?
What do you think?
So I wanted to talk briefly about the Volkswagen ID Buzz because it's finally coming to North America, although,
not really.
Not until next year. But
I mean, one came.
I remember being so excited about this when it was announced, but it's
years
just
ago.
Been so long.
I was a vibrant young man then. I could go to the refrigerator with ease.
So I still think it's a super cool car. It's but it's going to be quite expensive. And finally coming to North America next year. But it's, Volkswagen is another one that seems to really want to sell electric cars. They're doing it more so in Europe than North America. They haven't had too much success, or the regulations in Europe, I think, are such that it makes more sense to whatever supply they make to sell them in Europe. But, hopefully they're still ramping up. Hopefully the ID Buzz gets to North America. It's a cool van.
Yeah, it mimics the old Volkswagen vans, but it doesn't raise its roof, so it's not a camper van. So somebody will have to alter one, or they'll have to come out with one in the future, where you can stand up in it. But it is very compelling. It's very cool. It's very techy. It's very, it's like an IKEA made it or something. It's just kind of got its own sort of vibe to it, and it's neat. But it'll matter how far it goes and how fast it charges, like everything else. If it doesn't charge fast, doesn't go far, then that's going to be a problem. And Brian, they haven't announced the price, and I'm guessing it's going to be about $100,000, 90, 100 grand. It's going to be very expensive, especially the first ones.
Yeah, probably 100 grand Canadian. I would think maybe more like 70, 80 in the US, but I guess we'll see.
And it's time for the tweet of the week. From Gogoro, the scooters with swappable batteries people that we've been following on the show, because 2- and 3-wheeled electrified transportation has taken over the world and displaced already 1 million barrels of oil per day. And they tweeted out that let me get this right, 471,397 smart batteries have been swapped since 2017. In the last 30 days, though, the Gogoro network subscribers have swapped 371,000 plus smart batteries per day.
Wow.
That's per day in the last 30 days. So this is taking off, and I love their system. It's a kiosk with a battery the size of a loaf of bread with a handle on it. You pull it out of the kiosk without doing anything, stick it in your scooter, put the dead one back in. That's all you got to do. It builds you. It knows who you are and knows whose battery you're taking. And it's very simple. And Korea, the government is actually subsidizing them there now. They like them so much, the government is actually going to subsidize putting installation of these swapping facilities in 3 major cities. So that's cool that the governments are catching on. So look for them in Korea. Korea's, not as heavily dependent, I don't think, on 2- and 3-wheel transportation as some other regions, but, it still makes a big difference. Brian, we've got some mail. Would you care to read it? It's from Derek this week.
Yeah, excellent letter from Derek. Hello, Brian and James. I've been meaning to write for a long time to let you know how much I enjoy listening to the show. When I first found your podcast, I think you had made just a few episodes, but I was pleasantly surprised to find two like-minded Saskatchewanians, and that's the name for people who live in Saskatchewan is Saskatchewanians.
Yeah, don't try and repeat that at home.
Yeah, I've been hooked ever since. You have a great rapport and always make the show interesting and entertaining. Thank you, Derek. That's very nice of you to say. So he goes on here. I enjoy that you've tried to cover all aspects of the clean energy transition. It's great to hear about different transportation, building, generating, and storage breakthroughs around the world. And I think we should, like I said, talk more about things like public transportation because that's important too. He says, I enjoy James's rants about how silly and backwards our provincial government handles everything climate related.
Thank you.
So, James, you have permission to continue ranting, I guess. I would like to hear more about your thoughts on agriculture and construction/mining as well. I work at John Deere in Davidson that we talk about frequently, the halfway point between our two cities. And he says, I know that agriculture seems slow to adopt electrification, but things are changing, and I think they will change quicker than anyone knows. John Deere finally has an electric lawnmower available. This is a riding, zero-turn, big riding electric mower, and more models in the next year or two. They also have new models very close to being autonomous. Basically, every tractor, combine, and sprayer has most of the hardware in order to drive themselves. Most major ag and construction mining manufacturers have several models coming out in the next 2 years that will be electric and or autonomous to some degree. Futurefarming.com has some pretty interesting new tech coming out. One other thing I'd like to hear your thoughts on is the electric retrofit industry. It seems every time I Google electric conversion, there are more and more companies that are converting classic or even modern electric cars to electric. I think this could be a huge business in the next few years as battery costs come down and people realize the many benefits. I'm closely following along with Brian's heat pump install. He says, we live on an acreage without natural gas, so everything is electric, which I'm surprised about. We have a 1980s resistive forced air furnace that works great, but I'm thinking about switching to a heat pump, which would be more efficient. My in-laws were forward-thinking and built it similar to James's house with double insulated offset stud walls. So heated with electricity, but super insulated. So the electricity bill sounds manageable. They got in on the Sask Power net metering program like James and I did before they made the program worse. So, you know, we're all grandfathered in, including Derek here. He's got a 27 kilowatt setup that basically covers all their power needs on the acreage throughout the year. It's been awesome so far. He enjoys making his own power. Anyway, I could go on, but I wanted to let you know how much I enjoy this show and appreciate you both spreading the clean energy ways. From Derek Green. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. You make some good points. I've been thinking about agriculture. When we live in an agricultural place, like we live in a city that exists because of agriculture, basically.
Yeah.
There's lots of wheat farming and grain farming around us for miles and miles on the flat prairie. I'm always perking up when I hear about agriculture going electric. There hasn't been a lot going on, and I suspect it's because the price for doing so is high right now, like it is for cars.
Yeah.
And that's going to mean, only a small number of operations will do that. But, my uncle farmed, my late uncle, and he used to spend a lot of time fixing things,
Yeah.
He'll spend, less time in the future. Farmers will spend less time fixing things, fixing their water pump on their tractor because they'll be electric. Mind you, when something goes wrong with those things, you'll have to bring in somebody probably, but there could be a traveling service technician, which will get there quickly. Yeah, no, I see a lot of advantages. One advantage is people like Derek, you can make your own power. Because you have a farm, it doesn't take much room on your farm to set up and, supply enough power to cover yourself. It takes an array or two of solar panels, somewhere not too far from the house or in the central part of your buildings. And boom, you've got your power covered. So that's cheap. So then your energy is all cheap. You don't have to store diesel on the site. And you got your traction. You got immediate control of various wheels on a tractor. I don't see combines, those big machines that harvest grain, because they go 24 hours a day. and you only use them once a year. So yeah, I think you got to leave those gas until such time as, you know, they probably won't electrify those in our lifetime. I don't think it would make much sense.
Yeah.
But
that'll be like airplanes, one of the later things to switch.
But autonomy is a big thing too, right?
Huge. And I know they already, you know, combines and stuff have GPS on them to help them steer. I don't really know how it works, but I know that they're already using lots of high tech like that.
Yeah. I mean, you do one that you know where you've mowed or you swathed or you seeded, and it tells you, okay, turn a bit to the left now because you're overseeding, you're wasting your seed or something like that. So yeah, that's great. 27 kilowatts is a pretty big system to power their acreage, right?
Well, it made me feel better, though, about getting the heat pump in my own house, because I am worried about my electricity bill spiking in the winter because I'm, you know, getting rid of the natural gas. I'm going to heat with electricity. So his solar system is basically 3 times the size of mine. And I wish I had one that big. So I'm not going to be covered. I'm going to have to buy a bunch of power from the grid. But I thought that I was, you know, heartened by those numbers that he doesn't have a heat pump. It's just a resistive heater. And still, the 27 kilowatt system, he can manage all of his needs with that. I thought that was encouraging.
Yeah, it is. You know, it goes to show that energy efficiency is an important part of the equation of what we're doing here in the energy transition. Like, the more you can do with that, the better. And we've made a lot of progress with LED lights and appliances and things like that. I think most big players are electrifying. They're just, they're getting going. They're slow to do it. And we will talk about it whenever the story comes up. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And, you know, he says his house is very well insulated. So that's a big part of the equation. But that would also make him a great candidate for a heat pump if he wanted to install one.
Yeah.
They're not cheap is the only problem. I mean, it's, I'm going to end up spending, like, if I just replaced my furnace with another natural gas furnace and then put in a conventional air conditioner, it would cost a certain amount. And the heat pump route that I'm doing is probably about $10,000 more than that. Like, it would be 15, but I'm going to get a rebate from the government with the clean energy program. So I'm spending kind of $10,000 more than the conventional alternatives. So, you know, the heat pump won't be cheap if Derek wants to do that. But he would probably at that point have excess power that he wouldn't need that would be fed into the grid, I imagine.
Yeah, and you are not going to make that back. You're doing it for basically for the show, to have content for the show.
I'm doing it to have something to talk about on the show, basically, yes. But anyway, I wanted to mention the lawnmower as well, because I mentioned this before. My brother bought a large riding zero-turn electric mower recently to replace his gasoline one. So he didn't get the John Deere one, I don't think. The John Deere one just came out. But my brother has promised to maybe send us a few thoughts about what it's like with the new electric zero-turn mower compared to the gas one, which sounded like a nightmare, which he had to fix all the time, you know, like one of those kind of deals.
Just a programming note that we will be not here next week because Brian will be continuing to travel in the UK. So I'm going to put up a repeat episode from December 2022. So don't panic. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode, and I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Oh, and just one last thing from Derek's letter. He mentioned electric conversion for existing electric cars. And I remember being quite obsessed with that, like about 5 years ago when I was like dreaming about having my first electric car. It seemed like electric conversions was going to be a huge thing. You know, 5 years later, it's still not really a huge thing. It's, I guess, bigger than it was.
It's niche.
It's niche, unfortunately. I think it would be amazing to be doing this all the time for like cool classic cars. I know Jaguar converted some of their old Jaguar S-Type cars to electric, and I think you can even buy those from Jaguar for an exorbitant amount of money. The one I want, I've always wanted a Nissan Figaro. It's a weird Nissan that you can only get in Japan, but some people have imported them to North America. It's this cool little 2-seater retro-looking car. I've always wanted one, but of course it's gasoline. If I had one, I'd want to convert it to electric, but it would be such a huge pain in the ass to do that and incredibly expensive. You know, just to have a niche little car. You know, it's a great thing if you're a car collector, if you're Jay Leno.
Or Rowan Atkinson.
But, you know, they always end up with less range. It's hard to get proper but it's hard to get proper range out of an electric conversion like that. So
Yeah.
It's always going to be niche, but certainly
You gotta love the car. You got to be Neil Young,
Yeah.
have lots of money, love the car, want to bring it back. Otherwise, you're missing out on modern safety features, which there are plenty of.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of safety.
Yeah, I mean, I do love the Nissan Figaro, and I've wanted one of those for decades, literally decades. But it would be kind of it would be a toy. It would be an extra car that I drove on Sundays to get groceries. So, not really practical. Just really kind of a collector's
There's
item.
somebody in town that has an amphibious car, right, and drives it in the lake.
Yeah, I forget what those are called, but yeah, you can drive them in the lake.
Very old, but classic. Very interesting stuff. There's a Volkswagen Bug from the 60s, I think, or 70s that has been converted around here, too. Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
From Power Magazine, a new wind farm opening on one of Arizona's oldest cattle ranches. The cows were unavailable for comment, but the ranchers say their operations benefit from the building of roads and clearing of snow, so they do not affect the cows as far as we know. The ranch land is vast, far bigger than your herd of cows by many, 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 many times. Throwing some wind turbines up, no brainer. People say it takes away from agriculture. These cows aren't going anywhere, Brian. They're staying right there and, under the wind turbines. The LA Times says it may cost taxpayers $21.5 billion to clean up California's oil fields.
Yeah, we have a similar problem here in Canada, probably everywhere in the world that has oil wells, is that the oil companies don't really want to pay for the full cost, which includes cleaning them up when they're done with them.
Fox News host says, why try save the earth when the afterlife is real?
Is that an Onion headline?
No, that is real.
That is very sad.
I mean, the Onion probably covered it. They probably did a what do you think? But why would you think that's an Onion headline? Of course it's a Fox News headline. It's time for a CS Fast Fact. From Bloomberg, Europe's airlines are quickly tying up the supply of available animal fats to produce biofuels. That's creating unintended ecological knock-on hazards, which include a surge in palm oil production. Brian, 8,800 dead pigs are needed to power a Paris to New York flight using only waste biofuels such as animal fats.
Is this an Onion headline,
no,
James?
It's not an Onion headline. My God. What a thought. Huge news. In a memo published in May, the EPA says it wanted to take central air conditioners and gas furnaces out of the running for Energy Star. That is the program which certifies energy efficient appliances. So you're not even going to be able to have a central air conditioner or a gas furnace that is Energy Star rated, because you could do better. You can get a heat pump.
That makes total sense.
It would steer consumers to heat pumps and electric appliances. A single, quote, tuned car in the middle of the night can easily wake up 10,000 people. We're talking about loud mufflers here. Anti-noise radars are helping. Berlin is now installing its first anti-noise radar. We talk about pollution on the show. I would like to talk about noise pollution, because I live near a highway where engine brakes are used on semi-trucks and they're not supposed to. It's very loud. It's like a machine gun. And then the stupid police plane keeps flying over my house, especially when I'm in the pool.
There are new regulations, James, in Saskatchewan, but it's for light vehicles. It's not for trucks.
Yeah.
But this was just in the news recently in Saskatchewan. Light vehicles must be quieter than 101.3 decibels. That's the new rule.
There's a parking lot in our main park where all the people with interesting cars hang out, the car enthusiasts. They should just test all of them there and just make it a day. That's basically, they'll all be there. From the New York Times, the largest homeowner insurance company in California, State Farm, announced that it would stop selling coverage to homeowners, not homeowners in fire areas, everyone, because it is too risky. In parts of eastern Kentucky, ravaged by storms last summer, the price of flood insurance is said to quadruple. Louisiana, the top insurance official says the market is in crisis and is offering millions of dollars in subsidies to try and draw insurers to the state. In Florida, homeowners are increasingly struggling to buy storm coverage. Most big insurers have pulled out of the state already, sending homeowners to smaller private companies that are straining to be alive. There was a story in the news here locally We had some big rainstorms lately, and there's some people in a housing project where they have to park, and their parking lot wrecks their cars when it's a deluge of rain. Like all the cars are wrecked. They're done.
Mm-hmm.
They're totaled because they have to park in a parking lot that is low to the ground. And it's costing you and I money. Brian, from the Washington Post, starting sometime next year, California will charge residents for electricity based on how much money they make. We'll talk about this more in future episodes. Proponents.
Is this an Onion headline, James?
No, it's not. The lightning round is not a Onion segment, Brian. I repeat.
Okay.
Proponents say it will help electrify, and critics say it will cut into efficiency gains. So it's real. India to add 2 gigawatts of hybrid wind and solar this year, but 16 gigawatts of just solar panels in 2023. That's like 16 peak outputs of nuclear reactors. Time for another CS Fast Fact. This is from Dr. Rebecca Altman. Guess what year ferroplastic pellets fished out of the ocean first appeared on the cover of Science magazine? Not 2014, not 2004, not 1994, not even 1984. It was 1974. I was a lad. Probably peed my bed. I don't remember peeing my bed, but it seems possible. So there it is, Science magazine, 1974. They had found plastic. Oh, it's a bonus CS Fast Fact from Professor Peter Strahan, friend of the show. Is that fair? He follows you on Twitter, doesn't he?
It sounds right.
Iceland generates more than 86% of its electricity from renewable energy sources, according to Eurostat, and around 66% of this comes from geothermal. Way to make use of your geothermal, Iceland.
Yeah, they're doing well in geothermal.
Solar wind covered Belgium's entire electricity demand for the first time, says the Belgian grid operator. Entirely wind and solar. And people on Facebook and Twitter say, that's not possible. Well, you idiots, it's happening. And it's not an Onion headline. A new study in Great Britain shows that more than 80% of households that have replaced their gas boilers with electric heat pumps are satisfied with their new heating system.
Yeah, I hope that's going to be me. I mean, it'll just be great not to have natural gas in my house eventually.
And finally this week, good news for Japan. Its gas consumption plunged nearly to record lows. And that matters because Japan is the third largest LNG importer, liquid natural gas, importing 98% of the gas it uses. So why is gas plunging? Well, they're returning to nuclear after a decade or so after the disaster, and energy efficiency, which we talked about on the show, how important that is, and solar is starting to really take off in Japan. So Japan's goal is 36 to 38% renewable energy by 2030. And that is our show for this week, our international show. Please take the time to contact us. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, which is a good idea this week because you can see the beautiful background behind Brian in Wales. And check out the energy store, the Clean Energy Store. I was going to wear my hat this week. I'll wear it next week. I love my hat. The link is in your show notes. And if you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app because that way you get our new episodes delivered every week. Remember, we're not here next week. It is an encore episode. And are you wearing your Clean Energy Show t-shirt around the UK yet? Has that come out of the closet of the suitcase?
Yes, I've worn the t-shirt, but I lost my Clean Energy Show hat on the airplane.
Oh, fudge. On the airplane?
Yeah.
As if the airplane thing wasn't a disaster enough, it's getting worse yet. My God, we'll probably find out that you've picked up a deadly disease from the airplane as well one of these days. So again, next week, we're off. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Brian, thanks for going to all the effort to put together a show while you're on vacation in sunny Wales, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.